Hello, everyone. My name is Prateep Nayak, and I am representing here the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership for Building Strong Small-Scale Fisheries. I am at the University of Waterloo in Canada here. So welcome, everyone, to the B2B thematic webinar series. I am delighted to be the host today, and I will facilitate this webinar. First, I would do a couple of introductions, including the introduction to the series and to our speaker today. And then I will invite our speaker to take the platform and speak about her topic. And then we will open it up for discussions through the questions that you will ask in the chat section of your of YouTube. So just as an introduction to the B2B Global Partnership, which is a partnership of transdisciplinary research, knowledge, and action network with over 100 members from Africa, Asia, Canada, and internationally. The goal of this particular partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transition from vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand vulnerability and viability is not just in economic sense, but also to include the political, the cultural, the ecological, and all other aspects of human life that impacts small-scale fisheries in their specific contexts. Our focus as part of this partnership is fourfold here. One is to co-create and co-produce the knowledge that can help in this transition from vulnerability to viability. The second is how do we keep all the knowledge in a place, which is the database that can be accessed by the stakeholders at all levels, including the community to the policymakers. The third objective is to develop transdisciplinary capacity across all these levels so that everyone can join and contribute to this transition process from vulnerability to viability. And the fourth is how can we synthesize all of that knowledge in a way that can not only assist the transition process, but also empower and build capacities all around. The B2B Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisher communities and other key NGO, government, and university partners to enhance small-scale fisheries viability. We are conducting transdisciplinary, community-engaged research in 6 countries in Asia. That includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa. That includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the B2B Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, disciplinary boundaries through a shared interest in addressing global change impacts on small-scale fisheries. The B2B thematic webinar series, for which we have all gathered here today, is an initiative of the B2B Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries. The goal is to feature academics, government representatives, practitioners, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, practical, and policy aspects of small-scale fisheries, both locally and globally. The B2B webinar series takes place on the last Friday of every month, and it will continue to be so during the entire year of 2023. So please join us every last Friday of the month for a webinar talk. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details regarding the monthly webinar, including the speakers, topics, and titles, and links to the webinar platforms is available on our webpage, which is www.b2bglobalpartnership.org. Today's webinar is the third in the series of B2B thematic webinars planned for the year 2023. And the 27th since January 2021, when it all started. And it is my privilege to introduce Ms. Foluke Omotayo Areola as our distinguished speaker today. Ms. Areola is a seasoned fishery professional, consultant, administrator, and facilitator, especially focusing on the sustainability and viability of small-scale fisheries in Nigeria and regionally in Africa and also globally. She is the president-elect of the African chapter of the World Aquaculture Society. Ms. Areola is the first federal director of fisheries quarantine in Nigeria and the first female acting federal director of fisheries and aquaculture. Ms. Foluke Omotayo Areola is a distinguished fellow of the Fisheries Society of Nigeria, FISON, my apologies, the first female national president of the society as well. For the past 40 years, she has provided technical guidance in the research and development of fisheries in high-level national, regional, and continental initiatives. Ms. Areola is a prolific speaker and writer. She is the author of several articles, book chapters, technical reports, and policy documents. You can find it all online if you do a scan. Ms. Areola is also a researcher in the B2B Global Partnership. She is currently pursuing her doctoral degrees at the Lagos State University, Nigeria, actively working with Dr. Seun Akintola as her supervisor. It is my privilege to invite Ms. Foluke Omotayo Areola to deliver today's talk for the B2B thematic webinar series in March 2023. And her talk title is The Legal Instruments for the Development of Sustainable Small-Scale Fisheries Governance in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us today, Foluke. And we are all going to be eagerly participating in your talk today. The floor is yours. If you can unmute yourself, please.
I want to, yes, okay. And I will go to. Thank you very much, Professor Pratek. I want to first of all thank 2V2 Global Partnership for this opportunity. And I'm particularly grateful to Professor Pratek Nayak and to Selvi, and also to my supervisors at the Lagos State University who introduced me to 2B2 Global Partnership, Professor Akintola and Dr. Fakoya. Good afternoon, good day, everyone. I'm speaking from Nigeria. Sorry, there was a temporary power outage just now as I was going to start. And I'm going to speak on the legal instrument for the development of sustainable small-scale fisheries governance in Nigeria. My name is Foluke Areola. The outline gives us the introduction, what small-scale fisheries in Nigeria is, down to conclusion and recommendations. Fisheries is the act of catching, processing, and selling fish or related products such as shellfish, oysters, cuttlefish, crabs, and so on. The fisheries sector in Nigeria is blessed with various types of aquatic bodies, namely freshwater, estuarine, and marine waters, with a coastline of approximately 850 kilometers long, continental shelf of about 37,943 kilometers, and a 210,900 kilometers exclusive economic zone. These are extensive inland fisheries of different biomes, such as rivers, lakes, seasonal floods, reservoir, gorges, creeks, and lagoons. The Nigeria fishing industry is characterized into three. We have the industrial, stroke the commercial capture fisheries, the artisanal, stroke the small-scale fisheries, which is the coastal and inland fisheries, and the aquaculture, which is fish culture and fish farming. FAO has defined small-scale and artisanal fishing as fishing households as opposed to commercial companies using relatively small amounts of capital and energy, relatively small fishing vessels, and if any, making short fishing trips close to shore and mainly for local consumption. They can be subsistence and they can be commercial. Small-scale fisheries in Nigeria are heterogeneous, multi-species, multi-gear, multi-technique, non-industrial. They are referred to as inland fisheries, coastal fisheries, and they take place in coastal areas, creeks, lagoons, inshore waters, and inland waters, targeting freshwater, brackish water, and inshore pelagic fish stock. And is carried out by small-scale fisher folks using both traditional and modern fishing craft. It includes fishermen, women on full-time, part-time, at subsistence level, at commercial level, and different sorts of gear, as already mentioned. Some could be destructive, some could be cheap, and some could be locally sourced. The sector contributes about 80 to 90% to fish production in the country, according to the FDF 2015. This nomenclature of small-scale fisheries as artisanal small-scale are used in regulations, acts, laws, edicts, and national fisheries policy. The small-scale fisheries contribute significantly to food security, employment, income, socio-economic development of urban and rural areas, and support livelihood to millions of people in Nigeria, and also generate foreign exchange for the country. A legal instrument is a formal written document that records and formally expresses an enforceable obligation or right. It establishes the legal framework by which various transactions are governed or given legal backing. Legal provisions are very important in ensuring that the rights of small-scale fishers, fish workers, and fishing communities are recognized and protected. Nigeria is a signatory to many international instruments and conventions, some which have direct and indirect bearing on the small-scale fisheries. And these include the Convention of the Law of the Sea, the International Plan of Action to Prevent Illegal, Unreported, Unregulated Fishing, IUU, the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries of 1995, upon which is a meta order, upon which Nigeria has based most of our small-scale regulations and fisheries policy on. And we also have and trying to adopt the FAO 2020 voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication, referred to as SSF guidelines. All these are possible through FAO and various fisheries management organizations that support Nigeria, such as the Fisheries Committee for the West Central Gulf of Guinea, FCWC, CCAF, Committee on East Central Atlantic Fisheries. Fisheries governance is a systemic concept relating to the exercise of economic, political, administrative authority, which establishes an overriding principle for the sector. There are legally binding rules, national policies, legislation, treaties, customary social arrangements, which is very important. They could be short-term or long-term, and they could be for a whole ecosystem of a local fisheries. There are 3 governance orders that have been established. The first order, which is the day-to-day decision-making at the grassroots level and which ensures interaction. The second order, which is the governing institution, and we're going to talk about the governing institutions in Nigeria, and the meta order, which I have already spoken about. And the most important ones are the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries and the SSF guidelines. The governance at the institutional level, second order in Nigeria, is by the federal government of Nigeria through the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the National Council of Agriculture, the Federal Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture, research institutes, universities, the Federation States of Nigeria. Nigeria has 36 states plus FDF, and the states play an important role in the governance of fisheries in Nigeria. The governance structure in small-scale fisheries has gone through 3 eras. The pre-colonial era, when fisheries policies were based on rituals, ceremonies. The colonial era, which established a formal administration of fisheries resources, giving regional autonomy, legislative power over fisheries. And the post-era, where we are now after independence, where laws and regulations are enacted at the national and state levels using the Nigerian Constitution. The political structure and arrangement from the Constitution's exclusive list places the marine system, that is the large-scale and small-scale fisheries in that ecosystem, on the federal government of Nigeria only. Then the inland fisheries is on the concurrent list with powers vested on both the federal and the state government. The small-scale fisheries is therefore regulated and governed by legal and policy instruments, both at the national and state level. And this is anchored on the fundamental provisions of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as last amended in 2010. This constitution is silent on the local government to make powers or legislate on small-scale fisheries, although by default, the power of traditional systems remain critical in the management of small-scale fisheries in most contexts. The fisheries legislation or law in Nigeria therefore have customary laws that exist parallel to statutory law. The customary laws, though, are largely unwritten, but they're developed from traditions and customs of the fishing communities. Therefore, we have a legal pluralism being operational in Nigeria. The fisheries governance and development system in Nigeria, we have the Nigeria legal system runs on laws such as acts, laws, regulations, and policies, and I've listed them: the Sea Fisheries Act, Inland Fisheries Act, the Exclusive Economic Zone regulations, and the Total Excluder Device regulation. The Federal Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture coordinates all fisheries policies and has the statutory responsibility for the enforcement of fisheries laws and regulation in Nigeria. The State Department of Fisheries enforces fisheries laws and edits. Edits were used in the military era, but it's still being used, so we just use it in this presentation as well. The states derive their powers to formulate laws from the Sea Fisheries Act, number 71 of 1992. So what are the provisions of the Sea Fisheries Act and what have we gained from it? The small-scale fisheries has been stated in terms of jurisdiction in the Sea Fisheries Act of 1992, that no motor fishing boat except canoes shall fish within the 5 nautical miles of the waters of the Nigerian continental shelf. By inference, canoes are considered as small-scale fishing vessels, which are thus allowed to operate within the 5 nautical miles limit in coastal waters. The Sea Fisheries Act 1992 is not specific to small-scale fisheries as a nomenclature, but appears to have used fishing craft, fishing boats, and canoe as metaphor for artisanal fisheries, actual word being artisanal fisherman. The delimitation of a 5 nautical non-trawling zone places restriction on trawling in a seawater area of the Nigerian continental shelf, which is essential to protect the artisanal fishermen that operate within the zone, also to prevent and reduce conflicts between them and trawler operators, and it's also meant to protect the area because it's a breeding and spawning ground. Now, the provisions of the inland fisheries. The Inland Fisheries Act covers licensing of fishing craft, the penalty of which is 500 naira, and as of today is $1.00. And so what it means is that the laws may not be followed by the fisherman if he's able to catch fish worth more than 500 naira, and what you are asking him to pay if he contravenes any of the act, the licensing of fishing craft. If he does not license it, is 500 naira. The provisions of this inland fisheries covers application for license, issuance and validity of license, identification mark of fishing craft, prohibition of obnoxious fishing methods. And this has a fine of 3,000 naira only, which is $6.49. Declaration of catch only when required to is a gap. And then provision of export and import of live fish without the permission of the minister, if on contravened, is only 25,000 naira, which is $54, whereas a consignment of export from Nigeria could bring thousands of dollars. And we also have, under the inland fisheries, the closed season, construction of dams and barriers by the state, which is at the state level by the commissioners of agriculture. Under the Inland Fisheries Fish Quality Assurance Regulation, which also affects small-scale fisheries, is the enforcement of the use of insulated fish holes, fish boxes, handling of fish catch on board, landing jetties, discharge of catch, provision from fishing in contaminated waters, and how to process. The enforcement of this law is by fisheries officers at the federal and state level, but they are very few. So they cannot cover the wide area where we have small-scale fisheries operating. The enforcement and offenses and penalties and seizures are all under the regulations, but the fine for any of the laws being contravened is 1,000 naira, which is only $2.16. So you can see that we have an issue there, but that does not mean that these laws there had not been things that have been gained along the line. Under this law, we have had supply of fishing imports, nets, outboard engines to the small-scale fisheries through IFAD, that is the FAO, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We have had supply by the Nigerian government through the Nigeria Agricultural Cooperative and Rural Development Bank, now Bank of Agriculture. And we have had, and farmers, the fishermen have come to an appreciation of the fact that there is a governing body, there's an institution that governs them, that looks out for them. And they formed an association because it's the law of the federal government that either you are operating in the industrial sector or you are operating in the aquaculture sector or the small scale sector, you must belong to an association. And for a long time, the Association of the National Union of Fisheries and Seafood Dealers was in charge of small-scale fisheries, artisanal fisheries in Nigeria. But in 2016, under Act 98 of 2004, the association changed to a cooperative association and became the Cooperative Federation of Nigeria. And this is to ensure that they can get credit, because most of the things that they used to enjoy in previous years have changed because of change in policy. We will speak about that when we get to challenges of the sustainability of small-scale fisheries governance in Nigeria. The challenges are often complex, interwoven, and differ in scope from community to community, revolving around ecological, socio-economic, cultural, and particularly governance issues. The following are part of the challenges: poor understanding of the subject to manage or govern. You will have noticed that in doing this presentation, I've been using artisanal fisheries, small-scale fisheries, and there's something with the name. And that is why even the FAO have come to realize, and the small-scale fisheries, that defining small-scale fisheries according to Johnson 2018 is a value-laden decision with political implications and material consequences, both for the environment and humans who depend on fishing for their livelihood and food security. And so the terminologies are interwoven and they are used like that, even in laws and regulations. Some laws will use fisher folks, use artisanal fishermen, use canoes, and this can be conflicting. Though there's no global standard or agreed definition of small-scale fisheries, but the SSF guidelines recognizes the great diversity of the subsector, which makes a single definition difficult, according to FAO 2015 subsection 2.4, and offer a common understanding of what small-scale fisheries entails, as including all activities along the value chain: pre-harvest, harvest, post-harvest, undertaken by men and women in both inland and marine systems of the country. And so that needs to be addressed. A national definition is quite imperative to overcome the historical injustice, the traditional disadvantages of the subsector, and heighten the voice of small-scale fisheries in the situation of power imbalance. The characterization of small-scale fisheries in Nigeria is also a problem. It is based on a set of quantitative metrics: vessel size, power, gear type, area of operation, and this can sometimes result in classification of fishes in more than 2 categories. Then the weak governance institution. As you have listened to the penalties reeled out, they're old. And so the institution also does not function well because, one, there is the regular funding of the institution is not guaranteed. The officers are not trained regularly. Capacity building, which used to be something that the officers enjoyed, has stopped with policy somersault. And you have that there are few of them because when the country went through the structural adjustment program, this cadre of people who should be in fish inspectors were the ones that were retired. And so there had been a gap. And so there's even still a gap in the succession of officers in the department. So we do not have enough officers to go around. And the small-scale fisheries are all over. They're in the coastal area, they're in the inland waters, they're in remote areas. And so it's difficult to govern them because of the widespread of their location. Unclear, unspecified policies is consistency and somersault. Unclear and unspecific policies, like the fisheries policy, is for self-sufficiency in fish production. It's not clear. We need clear policies that we say, you can do this, you cannot do this. And within the purview of the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, we say that since the small-scale fisheries is contributing so much to food security, employment, nutrition, they have to be taken care of. Their rights must be protected. The rights of the fishermen, the rights of the fisherwoman, the rights of their livelihood must be protected. So if we have unclear, unspecified policies, their rights cannot be protected. Data collection for the small-scale fisheries, that is a big problem. There's the issue that, the states legislate over the state, the federal government over the state and the marine waters. You find out that when you get data from the federal government for a particular state, it is quite different from the data from the state. And the differences are always so wide that they become irreconcilable. And so what do you work for? Because data is needed for management, for planning of a particular sector. Uncoordinated institutional overregulation of the sector. Apart from Federal Department of Fisheries regulating the sector, we have other agencies of government, ministries, departments, and agencies who come in and regulate. And it's a problem now. A fisherman was telling me 2 days ago that in Obadan, where they used to fish, when the dam was under the FCT authority, before it was changed to tourism, the fishermen, about 200 of them were fishing there. But now it has been changed, and so they can no longer fish there. And so all their investment is there, and there's no consideration to compensate them. The open access nature of the fisheries, which means that anybody can go into it except where we have cultural and traditional tenure system. And this leaves it open to overexploitation and overfishing, which is reducing the productivity to the effort of the small-scale fisheries operators. Illegal fishing practices and overexploitation of the resources. We have people using different things to catch. Illegal fishing in the coastal waters that small-scale fisheries are involved in includes transshipment at sea, piracy, not declaring their catches, and even in the inland waters, we have the use of explosive, obnoxious fishing methods using plants that destroy the entire ecosystem. And because there is no, the penalty is so little and the enforcement is not there, we have the challenge is there. Infrastructural deficit in the sector, that one is so bad now. Before, under the Fisheries, Sea Fisheries Act, and under the many programs that the the Department of Fisheries had carried out the inshore fisheries program, the marketing and distribution project. We have landing sites for small-scale fisheries, like we had in Utaiwa, we had in Yovoyon, we had in Lokoja, and markets in Maiduguri, markets in Kebbi State. But all these things through privatization were sold off. Even the terminals that were made both for industrial and small-scale fishermen are now being privatized. So fishermen are left with nothing than to just use the shores, the seashores, as their landing sites without amenities that used to be in those landing sites that fisheries gave to them, that had electricity, water, and so on. Depletion of the fisheries, decline in biodiversity, I've spoken about it, and it's also because of regulation. We now have our fishermen going to the coastal waters to fish more of mammals, and they're depleting them because the regulation is poor. The number of fisheries officers are not many. Lack of inland monitoring, control, and surveillance programs, illegal unreported fisheries, pollution, and competition for space. I will speak about this. Many fishermen have been relocated from their communities where they have rich fisheries resources because of exploitation of oil and gas in Nigeria, the laying off of communication cables, and construction of seaports that we just had in Lagos State, and cement factory, without any plans to relocate these people to another place, without any consideration about their livelihood. And this is leading to the next point, which is the failure of government to protect and rehabilitate fishermen affected by militancy activity, not only by militancy activity, affected by climate change, affected by oil and gas pollution, affected by pollution from fertilizers, pollution from agricultural activities in the inland waters, and this is a big problem. Also, it's a problem of distribution and marketing of the fish from the sector. Even though the fish from the sector, there is no restriction to it like aquaculture products in the international markets, because the locations are in remote places. Let's talk of the local market first. We have middlemen going there and just buying the fish at rock bottom prices and selling it at prices that are really high in the urban areas, because the fisherman does not have a way, first of all, to preserve the catch, and secondly, to transport it to the market. And when you talk of the export markets where they can go, if they have sanitary and phytosanitary measures in place, good agricultural practices, and this needs to be taught to the small-scale fishermen sector so that products from there can go out to the international market. Gaps in the administration of the legal instruments in the sector. Lack of institutional capability and capacity to monitor and enforce and control regulations. The challenges and these gaps are interwoven, so I will run through this. The institutions, I've already spoken about it. We don't have that, nobody sponsors them to go to collect data. It was so bad that when FAO started a project in Lagos State, FCWC had to come in to support so that fish inspectors can go and collect data. And some fish inspectors even had to be paying others to go to collect data. There must be a dedicated fund for the small scale sector, especially for data collection, because if you don't have data on what is being produced or the people are producing it, what they are doing, how do you regulate, how do you monitor, how do you control what is going on in the sector? The non-inclusion of the local government, which is the third tier of governance structure in Nigeria, is a problem because they are closer to the operators at the day-to-day level of operation. But that does not leave the small-scale operators out of tax. They pay tax to the local government. Actually, there's the issue of multi-taxation of the small-scale fishermen. They pay tax for where they put their tables, they pay tax for where they put their smoking cane, they pay tax for where they market their products. And so these gaps, there should be a place that is set aside for small-scale fish operations in local government areas that people will go to and meet them. And there must be an arrangement whereby they will get their products there and things will work out well. The strong awareness deficit in legal framework among both the operators and enforcer. Before, there used to be training, exchange program even for fishermen to go out of the country to meet other fishermen, but all these are stopped. Not to talk of the enforcers, the fisheries officers. Not many go out for training. In our time, there was a funding dedicated for training, and every officer must be trained. We go out of the country, learn what is going on, come back and replicate it in the country. There's also the awareness, knowledge gap, knowledge management gap exists. I've already spoken about it. And lack of forum for administrative harmonization of laws, regulations by the legal authorities at both the federal and state level. I have mentioned that the federal and state government control the inland waters together, but we don't have the legal authorities coming together and harmonizing this. Whereas the laws by the state is derived from the laws at the Sea Fisheries Act 71 of 1992. So there's an issue here. And existing penalties, like I've shown you, 500 naira, which is $1, or is it $5, are not punitive enough. So it does not discourage potential violators and encourages people to do what they like. More so, there are no regulators like they should be at the landing site. Possible obstacles to socio-economic development. Well, the existing legal framework is too outdated, and the process of updating is taking too long. It has been on now for years, and it must be done now so that the gains from the sector can come to the community and the country as a whole. Because if that sector is properly developed, then the fish from there can be exported to earn foreign exchange, because we don't have issues of what you have fed to the fish. The small-scale fisheries, the open access property, and unrestricted entry in inland fisheries has resulted in heavy fishing pressure on the stock, because everybody just goes with whatever to catch whatever they want to catch, because there's no regulation. A constitutional provision of fundamental rights for small-scale fishers is not there because of weak institutions. Their fundamental rights are not protected. Nobody cares about what happens to them at sea. It's just now that the department is trying to register small-scale boats and enforce that they use transponders so that they can be traced and their activities monitored. It is more on monitoring the activities, not even their safety at sea. So there's an issue there. Lack of access to credit. I just told you that the fishermen now had on their own to go and change their main organization from, change the name to a cooperative organization so that they can have access to credit. Before the NARCB, Nigeria Agricultural Bank, used to give them loans, but not anymore. Infrastructural empowerment, storage capacity, storage facilities, electricity, water that used to be at all those landing sites, Utaiwa, Yoboyon before, but they've been privatized, they've been sold. So they're no longer there. These things need to come back. An urgency to build a relationship of mutual reciprocity and respect by the supervising authority and small-scale fishermen. They will be poor, they may be in remote areas, but they deserve the same respect that is given to those operating in the aquaculture sector and those operating in the industrial sector. It's a shame that we have not had private investment in the small-scale industry and the small-scale fishing sector like we have had in the aquaculture sector and in the industrial sector. And so they need to be protected to have a voice. Lack of technical and commercial knowledge of local protocols by those who are enforcing the law. There is need for training. and lack of social capital development to promote investment, develop markets, and access international markets. So what are the international treaties that are yet to be domiciled? And we need to do it. And what do we stand to gain? We still need to domicile the SSF guidelines. It has, well, Nigeria has, it's voluntary, but Nigeria has accepted to go on with it. It has been signed. The Honorable Minister has signed, who has the power to sign some any instrument, legal instrument into a regulation. But has he been given the backing, the funding backing? Has he been given the legal backing for it to work? And what do we stand to gain? If SSF is domiciled completely and Nigeria is running with it, we will be able to review and strengthen the legal framework, including the policies, laws, and regulations that will promote the viability of the sector and enhance the protection of the rights of small-scale fishers and fish workers. That it will help in establishing a multi-stakeholder implementation committee with a term of reference, because those are the things in the guideline. It will help the development of a communication strategy that will strengthen advocacy and awareness. It will help in governance and collaboration amongst the stakeholders in decision making. It will not be a top bottom level policy decided up there and just given to the small-scale fishermen to implement. It will be something that they will be part of it. They will tell you the experiences and you will take that into consideration before making the law. Knowledge mobilization too will be taken into consideration, which will elevate the profile of the small-scale fisheries, promote inclusiveness in policy development and implementation, and support transition from vulnerability to viability. Resource mobilization will take place. We will be able to develop appropriate resource-based monitoring and evaluation system with key performance indicators and improve on data collection, capacity building and employment and empowerment, and inclusion of women in decision-making and governance, which is part of the instruments of the small SSF guidelines, and then the provision of incentive that will promote sustainable post-harvest management. I won't dwell much on that because we've mentioned it before. So what are the functionality of the domestic laws being implemented is hindered by political power, irregular, insufficient funding, socio-economic status of the operator, lack of private capital investment, discontinuity of programs such as training of fishermen in gear technology exchange programs, maintenance of a succession of action plan for the Federal Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture through deliberate actions and capacity building of the officers. The resolution of conflict between small-scale and industrial operators. Well, the Department of Fisheries and Aquaculture is doing that, but because of a weakness in the system and the cost of fishermen taking their evidences, carrying it from their remote areas to the offices of Federal Department of Fisheries in Lagos or in any other state, the process has, with time, discouraged the parties. And so it's a setback. What we now have is something that is like corruption, because we now find out that the small-scale fishermen will rather settle with the industrial fisheries violators or any violator and see whether foreign or local than start carrying the evidences to the office of the regulators. So there's a strong awareness deficit also among operators and enforcement that needs to be improved upon. A relationship must be built. The operators must be given a voice in governance at the development and implementation stage of regulations and policies. There must be regular interactions that between the enforcers, and the enforcers being ready to learn from the fishermen and put into consideration their concerns and aspirations on all issues concerning their operations. It's not that they should be happy because they are invited to a meeting. There's also need to form strategic partnership between stakeholders. In concluding, there is need for Nigeria to ensure complete protection, development, management, and sustenance of the vast small-scale fisheries resources to ensure their sustainability and avoid possible stock depletion and collapse. Because this will ensure a steady economic gain from the sector, good nutrition, food security, better livelihood for the stakeholders in the sector. This sector also needs increase in regular funding, not funding this year, none in the next year, or none in the next 2 years. Collaboration and investment from government, private sector, donor agency, all lovers of small-scale fisheries all over the world, the V2V, the too big to be ignored, FAO, World Bank, World Fish, every financial institution to develop this sector that has faced years of neglect in the country. So policy recommendations, there must be a deliberate effort to ensure that future regulations and policies and key principles of the SSF guidelines are integrated at national and state level. And in view of the existing governance in small-scale fisheries, ecosystem approach coupled with co-management is being advocated as it enjoys greater legitimacy than government-dictated policies within a weak governance, and investment in specific programs for the empowerment of regulators and small-scale fisheries operators to reduce knowledge gaps. I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Foluke. That was so important in terms of highlighting the legal instruments and the role of legal instruments in the governance of small-scale fisheries within Nigeria, and of course with vast implications for small-scale fisheries elsewhere. So we have now time to get questions from our audience that are watching from everywhere in the world. So I would read out some of the questions, and if you could provide some clarifications and answers, that would be great. So the first question is from Mundus Maris. I particularly don't know who exactly, but Mundus Maris is our partner of B2B. Mundus Maris is asking, hi Foluke, are there at least approximate estimates of the number of men and women active in small-scale fisheries value chains? No.
It was one of the things I said when I was giving the presentation, that data has been a very bad issue that I will rather not quote any figure, because I did some work for SCWC this year, and figures from the state and the federal are so different. And so that is giving it almost became like a problem between me and FAO who gave the consultancy, because the figures were not adding up. And so I deliberately, it was deliberate not to put figures of the number of actors, because you put a figure and it will be disputed and you do not have it. But I could send the figure by FDF, I don't know the latest figure, and I wouldn't want to give any figure. I've had an issue with data this year that was not good at all.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Dennis Frederick. Hello, I am from the School of Aquatic Sciences and the Fisheries Technology in Tanzania. How conflicts rising from two legal systems implementing different and separate legal instruments to manage the shared resources be resolved?
Okay, that was why I went into explaining the jurisdictions and the areas. In Nigeria, there's a peculiarity. We have the marine waters, and the 5 nautical miles is under the federal government, where the small-scale fishers are operating now, though there's advocacy for it to be increased to 12 nautical miles. Now, these marine waters are under the federal government alone, under the 1999 Constitution of the country. The governance is under federal government alone. Now coming inland, which is not the coastal, the marine waters, the fresh waters in the inland area, are under the states. We have 36 states and FCT. But the state cannot just form laws on their own. The laws must be derived from the law of the federal government. So we now have it coming from the federal government. So the federal government and the states legislate on the inland waters. So we have the marine waters under the federal government alone. But the inland waters, which is the fresh water, is under the state and the federal government, according to the Constitution of Nigeria. There's the exclusive list and there's the concurrent list. The exclusive list, where the marine water is listed, is under the federal government governance. The concurrent list, concurrent, is under both the federal and state.
I think this is a follow-up probably from Dennis Frederick. They're asking how fisheries regulations are developed in your locality, who actually make them and who are involved in the process, and is there any effects or conflicts that can emerge from doing so?
Yes, in local communities, like I mentioned, we have the traditional and the custom laws operating in some local communities, and they're very strong in the north. But in some communities, because of civilization and because of involvement, that may not be so. So in communities, actually, there should be the federal government there should be the state, and there should be the community, because we are carrying out a pluralism or legal pluralism in the communities. But in some communities where they have tenure rights, where they have rights to water bodies, where the water bodies are things that are passed from generation to generation, where tradition has told them that this water body belongs to this person and must pass to this generation, and where they have myths, where they have rituals that they must even perform before going to sea. It is those traditions that are more prominent in those communities than the other regulations. And the thing is, most of the communities are in remote areas, and you don't have fisheries officers there every day. Though they go there to collect data, they go there, the state fisheries officers do go there, but the customary laws are more prominent in those communities that are rural and remote in location.
The next question is, how can gender considerations be integrated into policies and regulations governing small-scale fisheries in Nigeria, and what are some of the benefits of doing so?
Yes, legal consideration, that the sea fisheries. Yes, the sea fisheries decree is now being updated, and one of the rules, even in SSF guidelines and the Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, which we are looking at, is to recognize the rights of women. Women must be involved in developing regulations and acts. They must be involved even in what is happening in the communities. There are some communities that will not allow women to get their rights, even though they have rights to water body. Then the laws must be made in such a place that the rights of women are protected. And if the rights of women are protected, you find out that in the process, in the value chain, which is part of the SSF guidelines and definition of small-scale fisheries, in the processing and in the processing sector, we have more women than men carrying out activities there. So there must be consideration for women as it relates to their activities, the hour they will work, the compensation that goes to them. It's not as if when decisions are to be taken, it will be, oh, only men can sit there, women cannot be there. Women must be empowered. And when distributing fishing inputs and outboard engines, we have had issues where some community leaders will say, no, women are not entitled to such inputs. Those things have to stop so that women will be empowered to go to sea. For instance, if they want to go to sea, many women go to sea, but they are limited in some places that no, they cannot go, or they cannot sell particular products. It has to go to this person. They have to buy through this avenue. And if this is enforced, you know, women are better managers of anything. They manage things better than men. If we empower women and we allow them to have inputs, nets, smoking kilns, and those things that men come and take and don't allow women to take, we will find out that to regulate the sector will be better. It has been found that when you even give credit facilities to women, they pay back more than men. And what we have had with the issue of the Nigeria Agricultural Cooperative and Rural Development Bank, most women, we pay back their loan and men don't pay. We've had that happen in the Federal Department of Fisheries under many credit facilities, that it's the women who are paying back, the men who are not paying back. So in giving allocations and in any consideration in developing policies, in implementing policies, in taking any decision that has to be with small-scale fisheries, there must be a percentage representation of women in such committees and management group. In Nigeria, it allows a minimum of 30%. And so there must be representation. And this will help for us to even be able to get our products to the export markets, because women are better with sanitary issues and hygienic processes.
Yeah, and the next question is kind of related to the previous question on how to include gender in the legal frameworks. This question is by Ebenemi Jo Ansa, and they're asking, thank you for your detailed presentation, Foluke. The draft national policy on fisheries and aquaculture is being reviewed in Nigeria now. So what changes would you like to see added to the policy documents?
I would like to see many changes. One, the legal framework must be such that protects. I'm speaking of small-scale fisheries, but she's asking about aquaculture. So I will answer that. For the aquaculture sector, the most important thing that I would like to see that is emphasized in the legal framework is access to international markets. We have had people invest so much in aquaculture in Nigeria that when they could not export to the American market, when the issue of harmonization of our regulations came about, and when America had regulation of siluriform, to which catfish, which Nigeria is the largest producer in the world, when they brought out the issue, there were so many gaps. The issues there were, what are the laws and regulations guiding aquaculture production in Nigeria? Have they been legalized? Have they become acts? Because if they are not acts, they cannot be, they are not acceptable. Have the operators been, are the operators knowledgeable of what they should do, especially in the case of fish welfare? How do you treat fish? How do you feed them? What do you feed to them? The issue of fish welfare has become so important in the international market trade, and which Nigeria is just about addressing. So in harmonizing laws between two nations, the other nation expects you to be at the same level in terms of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, in terms of operation. Are the aquaculture and fish farmers, are they knowledgeable enough as to what is being required of them to do? Because it's not the enforcers who will carry out what is to be done, but they are the ones to teach the operators, this is what is expected. This is what you can feed to your fish. This is how you can treat your fish. This is how you can slaughter your fish, is one of the important things that was asked. How do we slaughter our fish? Is it by banging the head or is it by stunting? So all those issues need to be addressed under the aquaculture framework. But when we go back to the Sea Fisheries Act that has to do with small-scale fisheries, number one is the issue of infrastructural development. You can see here our landing sites. It wasn't like that before. The fishermen must not be seen to as if they are not there. They must be encouraged, they must be empowered. They can be given better boats. I remember in the 80s that the fisheries department bought TR vessels for fishermen that could go for one-day fishing. That should be reintroduced so that they can go, they can preserve their catches, and then they will have landing sites where all the facilities, water, electricity, and you also provide schools so that their children can be educated. And data collection is very important. We must train fisheries inspectors and increase the number of fisheries inspectors. New fisheries inspectors need to be employed that will be at landing sites with the state fisheries inspectors to collect data so that we have data to work with. And then we need to work with other organizations like V2B, 2B2B, ignored, to be able to put into place the ingredients of the SSF. What are the things that are expected? The SSF guidelines, the code of conduct, are the meta orders from where the second order, the institutions, are deriving their norms and their laws. And so we need to go back. We need to work with them as a country. And then funding. Funding must be specific to this sector. What we have in the ministry now, where when funding comes, it is lumped off for all the departments and is now dependent on how you can prove that you need the money, what you can prove and ask is not the best. There is a need for funding of the sector. And also we can get funding from those who are importing fish from the country. Let them pay something for bringing in fish into the country. And we now have a dedicated fisheries fund to fund activities of the sector and take our fishermen from these states into a better state, wherein they will be better recognized and their products will be acceptable.
Yeah. Thank you, Foluke. We have a few minutes left only, and there are a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do is I will read 2 or 3 questions, and then if you can quickly respond to some of that. Of course, the discussions could continue beyond this platform through emails and other avenues. But let me read 2 questions at this time and for your quick answer. So the next question is Happiness Chukumeka. And Happiness is asking, saying thanks for the presentation. Given the governance issues listed, what is the way forward in terms of governance of the fisheries in the country if the applicable laws remain undomiciled? I think that was in relation to one of the slides you had on how to make those laws domiciled. And the second next question is by Moiniba Isaac, and Moiniba is asking, on the continent, decolonization is part of key debates on natural resources. Are there any discussions in Nigeria on decolonization of fisheries governance and fisheries management practices? If you can provide.
Thank you very much. I will quickly answer them. We need to domicile the SSF guidelines. It's still not domiciled. It's not signed into law. It's not there that everything in it must be done. It's voluntary, we agree, but if we want to move forward in the small-scale fishery sector, we must domicile it, we must give it legal backing by the National Assembly, and we must update all our laws. They are too old, they are weak, they are not, a fisherman would rather pay all the penalties than go through the law. It's not there. And then we have already decolonized. When I was giving my presentation, I did mention pre-colonization period where the different regions were legislating on fisheries, and then after independence. And after independence, it is the Nigerian Constitution, the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended in 2010, that is in operation. So we are no longer using the laws. We have decolonized to save time so that I can take other questions.
Yeah. And a lot of points you are making in terms of, the challenges and opportunities are linked to the question of, colonization and decolonization, because the history repeats. I mean, history is very reflective in the process of, finding those opportunities and challenges, so there is an indirect link, as one can see. So the next question is by Sogbe-san Okuwode. And then the question is, what impacts the ongoing fisheries policy document have on small-scale fisheries governance in Nigeria? So what are some of the impacts of the various drivers you were talking about, really creating a pressure on the small-scale fisheries? And then the next question is Ayofe Ahmed. The question is, are you satisfied with the present level of government involvement in small-scale fisheries development in Nigeria?
Yes, the last one first. I am not satisfied, and I don't think anybody is satisfied, and that is why there's an update going on. It's just that time is of essence, and that needs to be done immediately. When we talk about the expected economic benefits from this, if we domicile the SSF or in Nigeria, I was reading it out. When you go through it, when you have a multi-stakeholder committee where everybody is there, where everybody has a voice, you will be able to improve the socio-economic life of the people and the operators. It will affect both their natural, their socio-ecological, political life. They will get more gains from their operations because things will be done normally. How to handle the catch at sea, how to bring it back in a quality state that we earn more money. If there are markets and you have markets that the fishermen have access to where they can take their product, and hygienic situation where you have cabinets where they can sell, they have more income. And when you have more income, it impacts on their livelihood. They will live better. And there was the issue of other emerging issues that I didn't remember to mention, that nobody has them in the old laws that are now being imputed in the updated one. The issue of climate change, for instance, we've talked about gender. There's issues of transshipment at sea. There are piracy, labor issues. All these ones are just coming up. And because they are now in the law that is being updated, is going to improve the livelihood of the small-scale operators, because now they will know that they will feel that they are part of the process. When you see government officials inviting them to meetings and treating them with respect, it is one thing. When you are treated with respect, it's different. You feel good about yourself. You want to even follow the law because you now know that you are recognized. Not that nobody comes to you to find out how you are doing, what is going on, and you just come, I want your data, I want this from you. So it's going to impact on the socio-economic lives of the fishermen. Is going to the SS, I said, resource mobilization, both human, technical, and financial, will help to improve the life in the sector. And then we have the development of appropriate resource-based monitoring and evaluation system. So one will be able to know what is working, what is not working. If we put this law in place, how is it impacting the operators? Are they able to cope with it? Is it helping them? It's not just making laws and wanting to take licensing fee. It must be involved. We must care about what is happening to them. Are they making profit in what they are doing? All those things, even their health, caring about their health, putting them first. Climate change, when it comes and there's flooding, is general caring for everybody. There must be specific program for fishermen, because they are the ones who suffer most. When we have issues of flooding, they have to migrate. Is involuntary migration to other areas. They lose their craft, they lose their source of livelihood. They even reported cases of loss of lives. How are they compensated? How are they compensated where there is pollution from oil mining, from gas exploration, from seaport development? So all those things must be taken into consideration if we domicile the SSF guidelines. Then fishermen will be protected. You cannot just go to their landing site and say you want to do a program there without caring for them, and you start digging, and then the fish are clogged with sand and they move away, they can't catch, and now they have to look for money to go further inwards to be able to have an income and catch fish.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. We are almost at time. I will just read the last question, and then we'll not take the other questions that are on the list here. But we would make it available to you if you want to get back in touch with people. The last question is Isola Foluke, and they're asking, saying thanks for the entire enlightenment. Here in our state, we have the problem of human resources in a way that offers mount landing sites and penalties do not commensurate. What is the way out? If you have a 1 or 2 sentence answer, please go forward because we need to bring it to an end. Okay,
I've already said that everywhere there's the issue of human resources. The structural adjustment program of the federal government, it was a program of the federal government, retired the level of people who should be fisheries inspectors, and there was no replacement. So even at the federal level and all state levels, we have human resources issues. And so, except we want to put into place a mechanism wherein we'll be collecting data using satellite and all that, and that is expensive. I don't know how that would work. And I will respond to the very first question privately, because I have a figure of those who are involved in the sector. But for personal reasons and for what happened, I will not give the figure online. But I'm ready. I will send it to you to give to them immediately after this presentation, because I have a figure.
Yeah, people can get in touch with you as well. And I'm really sorry we're not able to take and a number of other questions, that are interesting questions that are there, but we will make it available to you, Foluke, so that the discussions can continue itself. So thank you once again very much. So that was so enriching and such a lively discussion. And thank you for asking the questions to all our audience. We do not have a topic yet and a speaker for the next month, but please watch the space on our website, on the YouTube side. We will announce the next month talk very, very soon. It is going to be on the last Friday, which I think is 27th of April. Okay, so once again, please stay involved in the critical issues that small-scale fisheries are facing, and this is our small effort to bring speakers and generate some interesting discussion that can help taking the issues and opportunities and challenges in small-scale fisheries forward. And hopefully there would be clear pathways and transition from vulnerability to viability in the small-scale fishing communities. So thank you everyone once again, and see you soon next month at another B2B thematic webinar series. Thank you.
Thank you.